Welcome to the Statler Financial Radio Show with Philip Statler. Have a question for the show or need assistance with your retirement plan? Give Philip a call today. 863-285-3815. 863-285-3815.
Are those year-end statements on your retirement accounts still coming in? If you're still looking at everything from last year, wondering what adjustments to make in 2021, you are in the right place. Today on the Statler Financial Radio Show, we'll talk about what you need to understand about your retirement accounts and how you can be proactive so taxes won't leave you with a fraction of the money you are counting on for your retirement. 863-285-3815 is the number to call to get started today. Thanks for joining us. Jen Rezac here alongside Philip Statler. He is with Statler Financial Services. Philip, always a pleasure to sit down with you. Hope you're doing great this week.
Hey, doing well, other than, they've been working on replacing our roof in our office. So it's been a little noisy. So if you hear a hammer drop, you'll know why.
That's right.
But more importantly, it's a flat roof. And so they put some kind of membrane on there and they've used some chemical to affix it. So it's rather stinky in my office right now.
Well, don't make any mistakes with that adhesive or whatever it was that they did. You probably heard about the woman who used the Gorilla Glue in her hair, and that was quite a thing. We won't make that mistake here.
She wanted to make sure it didn't move, right?
And it didn't. It was not going anywhere. Oh, what a mistake. Hopefully she learned her lesson there. And speaking of mistakes and wanting to avoid them, let's talk a little bit about, Philip. I know in my family, it took a while. It took a couple months to get everything in from last year as far as our different financial statements and, all that year-end stuff. It seems like it took weeks and weeks into 2021 before we finally had it all collected here. And after we've taken a look at how all of our different accounts did in 2021, how do we figure out if there are any adjustments we need to be making here in 2021?
Well, and you're right. Just to comment on how late stuff's been getting out this year, it has been really late. People are just companies are mailing stuff out a lot later. And it didn't help that the IRS didn't start filing electronically until like February 12th. So, a lot of issues there. But so now everybody's gotten their stuff. Hopefully they've taken a little bit of time to at least look at their statements. So I think when you look at where you are today and you start looking at those statements, one of the first things I asked, which is, hey, did you fully fund your IRAs? Have you done what you need to do to help for retirement? But you want to make sure you make those contributions. The other thing I look at is, I get comments all the time. Folks are inundated with so many statements because they've got accounts everywhere. They got them at the bank, they got them at this broker, that mutual fund company. And, one thing I just recommend is consolidate them, right? Let's, try to have maybe one place or two places where, your accounts are, and that makes it a lot easier to keep track of. And then, last year, if people look at their, especially brokerage statements, from January, it was a rough year with COVID last year, ups and downs in the marketplace. But overall, you should have seen some gains last year. And if you didn't, then you may want to start, asking some questions and trying to figure out why your account didn't at least see some positive returns last year. Right. And then lastly, I think, is you need to look to see what kind of risk allocation do you have in your accounts, and then how does that really line up with your risk number, especially if you're getting to that, you're 5 years or 10 years out from retirement, because another big '08 could come along and really knock you off your feet financially and force you to really push out retirement a little bit further. And so I think these are some things that folks need to kind of look at right now as they're kind of gleaning through their statements.
And it's important, the reason why we talk about this, Philip, it's important to understand what's going on with those different retirement accounts because there are tax implications down the road. And I think we do need to be mindful of that. We are probably going to see higher taxes in the near future. Just talk a little bit about what that means for people who are trying to save for retirement and how do they factor that in when they're looking at their 2020 statements and figuring out what to put aside or what to do in 2021.
Well, that's so true. I mean, when President Trump, when they rolled out the tax changes that he made, the initial thing is that we would be good until 2025. The end of 2025, the current tax rates we see today would sunset at the end of 2025. But that could change, right? I mean, we have a new administration. They could come in at any point in time and vote to take that away, right? To go back to what it was prior to. And so I think people need to understand that right now, today, we are in the lowest tax rates that I've ever seen and probably will ever see in the future. And so because of that, folks need to understand what the tax implications are down the road. And with all the stimulus that we've seen and all the COVID relief we've seen, that ultimately is going to mean that we're going to have to pay that back at some time. We've had to borrow that money. The government has. And so at some point, we're going to have to pay that back. And that gets done by raising taxes. So I think one of my beliefs is that, back in the 70s, we saw tax rates as high as, I think, 90% at that top rate.
Wow.
I don't know that we'll get to there, but I think we could, based on what we are and the deficits we're running and the amount of deficits we have right now and the spending we're doing. We could easily see tax rates go up substantially. And so it's a great opportunity right now, as in these low tax brackets, to start thinking about other alternatives, doing Roth conversions, right? Converting your IRA to a Roth. Looking at using maybe a life insurance as an investment because you can get some tax-free benefits from that when you hit retirement. So taxes are an issue and we need to plan for those. And, it really does mean that you need an overall plan heading into retirement. And so that's really what we do at Statler Financial is look at a holistic approach, making sure that you're taking advantage of all the tax things that are out there and making sure that your income plan is going to be as tax efficient as possible in retirement. So to get started, give us a call at 863-285-3815 just to kind of get a review of where you are and what things you may be able to do to enhance your retirement picture. That number again is 863-285-3815. Give us a call today and let's sit down and kind of look at where you are and where you may need to be.
That number again, 863-285-3815 to reach Philip Statler and the team at Statler Financial Services. Philip, here's the other thing to think about when we're talking about what's going on with our taxes down the road and how do we avoid costly mistakes with our retirement money. There have been some changes in the rules for required minimum distributions, the RMDs. And I know there are tax implications here for when you take out that income and making sure that you're following the rules. Those, of course, were suspended in 2020. So nobody had to take that money out last year, but the vacation's over. We've got to do that now. Also, they pushed it back. It used to be 70 and a half was when you had to start taking that money. Now it's 72. So all those people having a happy 72nd birthday here in 2021 need to start taking money from those tax deferred accounts. What do they need to know before they do that and before they take anything out?
Well, we're talking about RMDs, Jen. So folks need to understand that, if you're just turning 72, then you have to start taking your RMD. But let me just put this out there too, Jen, before we forget that there are people who turned 70 and a half and still have to play by those rules for last year.
Okay, yeah.
And so those folks gotta pass. But if you were born between January 1st of 1949 and June 30th of 1949, you may think, well, I got more time because I'm at 72. You don't get that pass. You have to take an RMD this year because you got to pass last year. You were supposed to take one last year. So you have to take one this year. So not only the people turning 72 this year have to start, but those people that got a pass last year that would have been 70 and a half have to take it this year. So don't forget that. Don't let that bypass you, because there's a 50% penalty if you don't take your RMD. That's a pretty substantial IRS penalty to have to deal with. So the other part of that, though, is when you're taking your RMD out is, where are you taking it from? And you can pick and choose which IRAs you want to take it from, as long as you take the whole amount that you need to take. Maybe you need to have some taxes withheld because you're retired now and you don't have taxes taken from any place else. That's something you need to keep in mind, that we need to look at that to make sure that we don't underpay our taxes and get penalized when we file our returns. Yeah, I think that the other part is, one of the things that I sit down with my clients and look at is, where do we take it from this year? Because do I take it from the risk bucket or do I take it from the safe bucket? And that's a question that we have every year, depending upon how each of those buckets did in the prior year. Sometimes it makes sense now. Hey, we've had a good year last year. Let's take it out of the risk bucket because it had the biggest gains last year. I think that's an area that folks need to look at. But the bottom line in all of that, Jen, is how much risk do we have spread across all of our IRAs and our retirement accounts? And that's vitally important, especially for folks that are getting closer and closer to retirement. Again, it comes down to, do you know what the risk number is in your portfolio? And does that risk number line up with your risk number and your risk tolerance? Hey, look, if you don't know what your risk number is, give me a call and let's walk through that process together. My number is 863-285-3815. 863-285-3815. Give us a call today and let's make sure that your risk number lines up properly with your portfolio. That number, one more time, is 863-285-3815.
This is the Statler Financial Radio Show. We'll be back.
Do you have a retirement plan but would like a second opinion? Call Philip Statler today, 863-285-3815. Statler Financial Services, 863-285-3815. If you owe $26.5 trillion and you didn't have the money to pay it off, what would you need to do? Well, you'd need to make a lot more money, right? Well, now America's debt is more than $26.5 trillion, and right now taxes are at historically low levels. It doesn't take a genius to realize taxes will probably go up. Now think about your retirement accounts. Do you want to pay taxes on some of that money now when rates are low, or later when rates are much higher? Whether you should pay taxes now or in retirement depends on a lot of things. Philip Statler and the team at Statler Financial Services know what to look for. Plan now. Philip can help you create a plan so your retirement is as tax efficient as possible. Call 863-285-3815 to set up a visit with Philip Statler and Statler Financial Services. When taxes go up, will you be ready? 863-285-3815. Advisory services offered through Statler Financial Services, Inc., a registered investment advisory firm in the state of Florida. Statler Financial Services may not give tax advice.
Thanks for joining us today. This is the Statler Financial Radio Show. Jen Rezac here alongside Philip Statler. He's president and CEO of Statler Financial Services. StatlerFinancial.com is the website if you'd like to learn a little bit more. Philip, let me ask you a very personal question. How much is left on your to-do list this week? How are you doing with that?
Well,
He doesn't want to answer.
No, it gets a little long.
Yeah.
And so then I just throw it away and start over.
Yeah. And that honey-do list, I mean, does Joyce keep you pretty busy with some things to get done around the house as well?
She reminds me of some things that need to get done. Pretty regular. There's this, hey, don't forget we need to do this.
Oh, yeah. There's always a thing. There's always
hang
a
that,
thing.
or, those type of things. We need to order this.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, and my threat to Jeff is always, if you don't do it, then I'm going to do it myself, and then you're going to have to redo it because I'm not going to use the right tool or I'm going to mess it up somehow. So that keeps him pretty motivated to know, I'll just get this done the first time. But I'm like you. If the list gets long, I get overwhelmed, and then I just don't want to mess with any of it. And I found this article called Top 10 Steve Jobs Success Secrets for Insane Productivity. And it's ironic because it's a ridiculously complicated title for an article about keeping things simple. But the first few tips they had were prioritize ruthlessly, seek simplicity, and say no to 1,000 things. So basically keep it simple. And that is the challenge for you today, Philip. Let's keep it simple. Let's just put a few topics on our retirement planning list to talk about today. What would, 3 or 4 things be that you'd put on that list?
So I would say that as we look at that list, we need to look at income in retirement, healthcare / long-term care, maybe even / risk as an area of concern.
Okay.
And then taxes. Nobody wants to think of taxes, but taxes definitely are an area of concern that people need to be aware of and understand how they are going to work against them.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me why you chose these things. When we talk about income, healthcare, long-term care, and taxes, why are these the things that we definitely want to have on that list for planning for retirement?
We've been doing this for a while now, and over the last, 25 years or so, those are the things that have become issues to our clients. As we've sat down with hundreds of families over that time period to help them plan out their retirement, these are the areas that seem to stick their ugly heads up. People don't really realize these are the things we need to be looking at. All they really care about is how big's my bucket over here that I'm going to have money to draw from. They don't have a plan in place, and throughout planning, we address these areas of concern that I think every retiree, pre-retiree, needs to have a plan for how they're going to address these things.
And, when we think about all of I know this is a short list here, but in general, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by retirement because there are a lot of moving pieces here. Maybe we're overwhelmed. Maybe we're just worried we haven't done enough to prepare for it. What advice do you have?
Start.
Okay.
Now,
just get over
simple,
it, right?
Right. But what happens when we get overwhelmed or we get consumed by something is we just think about it and we think about it and think about it. And that's all well and good, but if you never start, then you're not going to get to the process. And so that's it. Start doing something, just a little piece of something. Sit down with a financial professional that can help you, direct you. You have to have an open mind when you do that, because they're going to ask you questions that maybe you haven't thought about. And we're going to have to think through that process of developing and what I need to develop a plan for retirement, because let's face it, you've never been there. And the professional has, like I have, walked hundreds of families through that process and know the questions we need to ask, know what we need to drill down into to help them develop the plan that they're going to need to get them through retirement. And Jen, that all really starts with our financial x-ray. I mean, that's the key, because I don't believe you can go anywhere if you don't know where you are. Because think about a map. If in a map, when you ask for directions, what does it want to know? Where are you at now? Your current location, so that it knows how to get you to where you want to go. Well, retirement planning is no different. You need to know where you are right now. And that's what the financial x-ray really does for folks, Jen. It really dives deep into their current situation. What does their retirement portfolio look like? How much risk is in there? How much are you paying in fees and expenses that you just don't see because they're not transparent? Those are the questions that the financial x-ray will answer for you. Give me a call and let's start that process today. The number is 863-285-3815. That's 863-285-3815. Or you can go to my website, statlerfinancial.com. There's a link to my calendar right there. You can schedule your financial x-ray right there from the website, statlerfinancial.com or 863-285-3815.
Talking today with Philip Statler. He is with Statler Financial Services. I'm Jen Rezac alongside. That number one more time is 863-285-3815. So, Philip, as we are tackling the top topics for your retirement planning list, income is one that tops the list. So how do we know if we've saved enough to retire so that we will have income as long as we need it?
Jen, that's probably the most wrong question I hear.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know if that's the right grammar or not, but
it's all right.
So the question I get is, how much do I need to retire? And that's the wrong question. It's how much are you going to spend in retirement that we need to know, because that determines how big or how much we need to have in our retirement bucket to provide the income. So it's the question nobody likes to answer. What's your budget going to look like when we head into retirement? And that's the key is kind of putting together that budget of what are we going to spend in retirement? What's that look like? And then once you can help me figure that out with you, then we can back up and say, okay, here's what we need to have when you retire. It's not that difficult, but it takes some time and some thinking to make it happen.
So let's talk a little bit about our options for generating income in retirement. If we get hung up on the wrong question, we're focusing on how much do I need to save? A lot of times it's because we're looking at it the wrong way. It really matters the tools that we use to make sure that it will last and that we can have income. So what are some of our ways of doing that?
So you're right. So, and the question is, what tools can I use to generate the income I need? And there's a lot of different tools out there, right? There's people will have real estate investment trusts because they pay out a fixed interest rate. People will use annuities to create that income stream. That's what they were designed for, is to create income for your lifetime. So that's an option. There's a dividend portfolio. People will put together a dividend portfolio. That's an option. So the tool you use depends upon several different things, but having the tool available is a big deal. And so often we sit down and we see that not all financial advisors have all the tools that are needed to put together the income plan that's going to get you to where you want to be. And so it's important that you really look at somebody that has the independence to be able to use the tools that are out there, because there's a lot of tools out there. Mm-hmm. But the wirehouses, the Wall Street firms, the Midwest St. Louis firms, they don't always have all the tools that you're going to need to develop that income plan in retirement. So that's the key is putting together the right plan and not being overly optimistic about your income plan, because I've seen that too, and that will backfire on you almost every time.
Philip, talk a little bit about having a retirement income plan, how that is different from having a retirement savings account and having some retirement savings built up and just taking money from that as needed.
So that's funny you asked that question, Jen, because I equate that to, a lot of people I meet with have a junk drawer of financial products. Now, what do I mean by that? Mm-hmm. Well, they've got, if you open up your junk drawer, you got all kinds of stuff in there, right? And it's all useful at some point in your life, usually. And so I call this the junk drawer of financial planning. So people will have a bunch of products, but not have a plan of how they're going to use them. And so that's the difference. An income plan is very specific on where your money's going to come from, when it's going to come from that bucket, and how long is that bucket going to last, so that you can see over the next 20, 30, 40 years where your income is going to come from for the rest of your life. And so that becomes the product. That becomes the plan to get you into and through retirement. Look, there's a lot of folks out there that I sit down with week in and week out that have a junk drawer of financial products. They have a lot of neat tools. There's just no idea how they're all going to work together, if they're going to work together to create the income they're going to need. That's why I believe you need to have a financial retirement income plan. You have to have a retirement income plan, because unless you have a plan putting all that stuff together so you know where it's going to come from, then you're running by the seat of your pants. And nobody wants to head into retirement running by the seat of your pants. Let me help you put together your retirement income plan. Give me a call at 863-285-3815. That's 863-285-3815 to get started on your retirement income plan. Again, that's 863-285-3815. Don't procrastinate. Don't put it off. Let's get started today. 863-285-3815.
You're listening to the Statler Financial Radio Show with Philip Statler. He is president and CEO of Statler Financial Services. I'm Jen Rezac alongside that number again, 863-285-3815, or you can check out the website. It's statlerfinancial.com if you'd like to learn a little bit more. If you have a healthy balance in your retirement accounts, that is great news, but a healthy balance isn't an income plan. There's still more to do. So we'll talk about that on the other side of the break. Stay with us. We'll be back.
If you have a retirement plan and would like a second opinion, call Statler Financial Services today. 863-285-3815. That's 863-285-3815. Weddings, sports, vacations. Just about everything this year has been pushed back, shortened, or canceled. Now think about your retirement. You can't cancel it. You probably don't want to shorten it. But do you need to push it back? Philip Statler and the team at Statler Financial Services can help make sure your retirement dreams are still on track. Philip and his team have been helping families just like yours retire no matter what the situation is for more than 20 years. They can help design a plan so that whenever you are ready to retire, your retirement is there waiting for you. Take control of your retirement today. Call Philip Statler and the Statler Financial Services team. Do it now, 863-285-3815. Don't cancel, shorten, or push back your retirement dreams. Plan now so you can do all the things you've always wanted to do when you want to do them. 863-285-3815. Advisory services offered through Statler Financial Services, Inc., a registered investment advisory firm in the state of Florida.
Thanks for joining us today. This is the Statler Financial Radio Show. I am Jen Rezac, happy to be here with Philip Statler. He's president and CEO of Statler Financial Services. And just because you have a healthy balance in your retirement savings account doesn't mean you have an income plan. You still have some work to do. And one of the things that you have to do is protect that income. We can't just leave it there and dip into it and spend it whenever we want. Philip, what are some of the risks we need to be aware of to help preserve that income so it'll last?
Well, I think probably one of the things I see most often, Jen, is that, again, we look at that bunch of financial products.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times they're all invested in the market. So they all have market risk associated with them. And so the idea that, I'll just take money out of this account or that account to help subsidize my retirement sounds good. But what happens when we have a major market downturn because risk creeps in? And so that then says, are you willing to take less income because the market has eaten away at your portfolio? Most people say, well, no, I've got this budget of things that I need that money for. Well, that's why when we develop a financial retirement income plan, we want to make sure that the stock market is not going to affect your income, and your income isn't going to affect the amount of risk you have in your portfolio. And so I think that too often I see people just taking money out of their retirement account. It's all invested in mutual funds. And so, again, we have another 2008 and the market drops. Maybe it doesn't drop 50% like it did because your portfolio is a little bit more conservative, but still it drops 25%. Well, that's a big deal. Or you have like what happened, this past year, and companies stopped paying their dividend. Well, how's that going to affect your income if a company quits paying a dividend? And we had a lot of companies that stopped paying dividends. And so if you have a dividend portfolio, that impacts your income. And so that's why I believe you need to have a retirement income plan that buckets out the money into income buckets, so you know exactly where that money is going to come from. And again, the stock market doesn't impact your income. That's why I think that the retirement plan or the income plan is so important.
Talk a little bit about the fact that there are some other big risks we need to protect against as well. Things like healthcare costs. The projections just keep going up and up and up with this. Fidelity now says it's about $295,000 that the average 65-year-old couple will spend on healthcare throughout retirement. Doesn't include long-term care, but now we're pushing $300,000 here. What do we do to prepare for things like that? I mean, it's one thing to protect against volatility, but we're going to have to spend money on healthcare, and we're going to have to spend a lot.
Well, it definitely is looking that way. That's for sure. So as we continue to look at what healthcare is going to cost, I think we have to build in a plan or into the income plan, that part for healthcare. I mean, we have to budget it, right? It has to be part of our budget. And we have to figure that part of the budget is going to grow by about 8% a year is what they tell us. And so whether that's your Medicare supplement, whether that's your Medicare Part B premium, because that comes out of your Social Security, you're paying it one way or another. Typically, that's what the cost is, because if you have those two things, most people are pretty much covered for their healthcare costs. The Medicare Advantage plans, they're a little bit different because you may not have much of a premium to pay, but you have all that out-of-pocket deductibles or copays that you have to pay every time you go to the doctor or you have a procedure or you're in the hospital. And you can expect those numbers to continue to rise too, because healthcare in general is increasing costs by about 8% a year. So we have to plan for those things within our budget and within our income plan.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the ways to deal with long-term care as well, because as I understand it, Philip, the options today are very different than it used to be. We have much more than just getting a standalone long-term care insurance policy, right? Can we talk about how that fits in here?
Absolutely. So you're right. So back in the day, that was the only option. I mean, it was either you had nothing, which that was most people, or you had a long-term care policy that wasn't cheap. And the costs continue to rise. I still get folks that'll call me and say, hey, look, I got my notice. My long-term care is going up again. I don't know that I can afford to keep it. That's a conversation that I have with clients on a periodic basis, because that's where they are. But now we have some other alternatives. And let's face it, there's no perfect alternative, right? Long-term care insurance, for the most part, is not cheap. And so you either limit your benefit to what you can afford, which a lot of times that's not enough to cover your costs, or you have to pay the big premiums to get the coverage that you think you're really going to need if you end up in a long-term care facility. The other part of that is there's other things out there now. There's like life insurance that has living benefits. It has a long-term care rider. It has a terminal illness rider. So Now, those things may or may not cost you money, extra, money out of your premium. And in either case, they're typically going to, if you have to use them, they're going to reduce the death benefit. But it may be the way that, hey, you can pay that premium and know that somebody is going to benefit from the amount of money you put in there, whether it's you because it'll cover your long-term care cost, or your beneficiaries because at your passing, they're going to get the life insurance proceeds. So it's a way to say, hey, yeah, I'm not throwing away the money. Somebody is going to get a benefit because of that. The other is there's long-term care annuities that may provide additional benefits through the annuity. And so that's an option. Sometimes there's a fee for that. Sometimes there's a waiting period. There's all different things that you have to look at when you look at those areas. And the last way, Jen, is, and this is what, when I talk with folks, they seem to think this is going to be the default, is, Medicaid or self-funding or some other mechanism out there to pay for long-term care. Long-term care is an issue. And I personally have lived through it with my family on 3 different occasions. And I can tell you no one time has been the same. We've had different benefits we've had to look at. We've had different long-term care that has taken place. We've had long-term care policies we've had to deal with. So we've seen, I think, most of it between my family and clients that I've walked through. We've been there. We have a team in place that can help walk you through the process of whatever you're dealing with when it comes to long-term care. Give us a call, 863-285-3815. That's 863-285-3815. If we can help in any way with your long-term care situation. Again, that's 863-285-3815.
Talking today with Philip Statler. He is with Statler Financial Services. I'm Jen Rezac alongside. Philip, another thing you put on your short list for planning for retirement is taxes. How often do people overlook taxes when they're planning for retirement?
Yeah, I'm going to say most of the time. They don't think about it.
Most of the time. Okay.
They think about their IRA, their 401k, but they don't really think about the tax consequences. As a matter of fact, I've seen people accidentally, I say accidentally because they didn't know any better, just take all the money out of their 401k instead of rolling to an IRA. And all of a sudden they say, well, I'm missing 20%. Well, yeah, 20% went to the Uncle Sam as withholding. So it can be a bigger deal than what people want to think. I tell people, look, your IRA, you have a mortgage on your IRA, and the amount of that mortgage is dependent upon the tax bracket you're in and the tax rate you have to pay when you take money out. Now, whether that's a 10%, 12%, 24, 25%, all depends on what tax bracket you're in. And so, but taxes can eat away at what you think is yours.
So, Philip, and also explain the difference between tax preparation and having a tax-efficient strategy for your income in retirement, because a lot of times when we talk about taxes, we get caught up in tax prep and the April 15th deadline and this and that, but we're talking about something different here when we're preparing for taxes for retirement, right?
Oh, definitely. So, tax preparation, speaking from experience, tax preparation is looking backwards. A tax preparer is a historian. They are documenting what happened the prior year, what income you had, what expenses you had. It's all hindsight. It's all stuff that happened back in the prior year. Having a tax efficient strategy is looking ahead. It's developing a strategy for down the road, for not just a year down the road, but trying to develop a strategy for maybe 5 or 10 years down the road. That's the difference. Is tax preparation, things have already happened. There's not a lot you can do to change it. Having a tax efficient strategy is looking ahead and being able to design a plan that's going to have the most tax advantages to you as possible. And so that's the main difference.
Philip, what are some changes we can consider to help reduce the impact of taxes on our retirement?
So don't waste a tax bracket. Over the last couple of years, I've seen this quite frequently, as much as just 2 weeks ago. Sitting down with somebody who had money in an IRA and was paying zero taxes. Well, they're wasting that zero tax bracket when they could be taking some money out of their IRA and either converting it to a Roth or put into a non-qualified account. Either way would at least absorb some of that 0 or 10% tax bracket. And so we have a window of time that we can do that. And we want to take advantage of that as much as possible, because my belief is that where we stand now is probably some of the lowest tax brackets that you and I will ever see. And so we want to take advantage of that. And if it means paying a little tax now instead of paying a lot of tax later, well, that's what I want to do. I want to be tax efficient and make sure that I'm doing what's best for me, both financially and from a tax perspective, making sure they fit together. Look, if you're not sure how tax efficient your plan is for retirement income, then you need to sit down with us and go through our financial x-ray and income planning process. To get started, all you have to do is give us a call at 863-285-3815. That's 863-285-3815, or you can go to statlerfinancial.com and click on the link there to schedule a time to meet. That's 863-285-3815.
Talking today with Philip Statler. He is with Statler Financial Services. I am Jen Rezac alongside. There are some things that we aren't supposed to talk about in group settings, but we're going to do it anyway. The top 5 most taboo topics in retirement. That's coming up next when the Statler Financial Radio Show continues.
Call Philip Statler today to get started on your complimentary financial x-ray report. 863-285-3815. That's 863-285-3815. If you owe $26.5 trillion and you didn't have the money to pay it off, what would you need to do? Well, you need to make a lot more money, right? Well, now America's debt is more than $26.5 trillion, and right now taxes are at historically low levels. It doesn't take a genius to realize taxes will probably go up. Now think about your retirement accounts. Do you want to pay taxes on some of that money now when rates are low, or later when rates are much higher? Whether you should pay taxes now or in retirement depends on a lot of things. Philip Statler and the team at Statler Financial Services know what to look for. Plan now. Philip can help you create a plan so your retirement is as tax efficient as possible. Call 863-285-3815 to set up a visit with Philip Statler and Statler Financial Services. When taxes go up, will you be ready? 863-285-3815. Advisory services offered through Statler Financial Services, Inc., a registered investment advisory firm in the state of Florida. Statler Financial Services may not give tax advice.
1975 is the year Jaws hit theaters, becoming a summer blockbuster that gave us the famous phrase,
"You're going to need a bigger boat."
This is the Statler Financial Radio Show. Thanks for joining us today. Jen Rezac here alongside Philip Statler, talking about common risks lurking beneath your retirement. And boy, the music from that movie, Philip, that's what made the movie more than the shark, right?
Oh yeah. Oh man, I mean, dun, dun, dun. I mean, I'm sitting there, and hey, in 1975, I wasn't a very big kid anyway, so I was scared to death. I'm not a scary movie person. So I was sitting there with my hands over my eyes. You'd every now and then you'd open up just a little bit so you could see what was going to happen. Yeah, yeah.
But without the score, without that intense music, it's just not the same effect. I don't know if you've ever seen it, like clips of it, if it's on TV or something, when you don't have the music turned up, it's just not the same. It's just not the same at all. So it really, that music is what made the movie. And I'll tell you too, I'm a big believer in always reading the book before you see the movie. I did, in fact, read the book Jaws before I saw the movie because I'm fancy. Movie's better. I'll just say that the movie's better. It had the sound. It had the score.
sound effects, right?
Yeah, had the sound effects, had the music. We're not going to play that throughout the show today. That probably would get us into trouble, and we'd be getting everybody too worked up over all of these risks with our retirement. So we don't want to be fear mongering. Just wanted to have a little fun there with the music at the beginning, but. Philip, we talk about this because there are some common risks lurking beneath the waters of our retirement. And the first one that I have on the list today, healthcare. Major cause of unexpected bills in retirement is medical expenses. According to estimates from Fidelity, the average 65-year-old couple can expect to pay $285,000 in healthcare costs in retirement. Doesn't even include long-term care when we look at those figures. So how do we factor in healthcare costs in our retirement plan?
Well, I think we have to plan for it. Obviously, that yes, we're going to have healthcare costs, but let's really break down that number a little bit, Jen, because I think sometimes when we look at that number, it becomes a fear factor, and I understand that's a big number. I mean, don't get me wrong. But let's think about how long do they expect people to live in retirement, right? I mean, let's say you live 20 years. Well, that's still a big number, right? That's like $7,000 per person over the next 20 years. And so where does that number come from? Well, first of all, that's retired and has Medicare, most people have Medicare Part B, right? So you're paying into Medicare for your doctors and labs and those type of things. And right now that number is I think it's about $145 a month, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that goes up every year. I can remember when it was less than $90. So that's one thing. Number two, you have to have a Medicare supplement to help offset that 20% that Medicare doesn't pay. So that's a premium. It's a big number that continues to escalate. Don't get me wrong. It is a big number. It has to be planned for, but it kind of is a budgeted expense because if you have Medicare and you have Medicare gap coverage, then you're out of pocket other than prescriptions. Prescriptions add up in a hurry. I get people to hit them donut hole in a heartbeat. I mean, that's probably the biggest expense. It truly outside of your insurances is that whole prescription drugs is gone haywire for folks. So don't let the numbers scare you. When you divide it out and you figure out where that numbers actually come from, it's a budgeted expense for most people because it's insurance from that standpoint.
Well, and I think that's an important point to make because it is really easy to get overwhelmed and you do start to get that panicky feeling. Again, the Jaws theme kind of playing in the back of your mind there. But when you break it down into smaller bites and you take a realistic view, it's a lot less intimidating. I mean, it's still something to be planned for. We don't want to not plan for it. But that does make it a little less of a big frightening threat when we break it down that way.
And saying it's more palatable that way may not be quite the right word, but it does make it a little bit more of a, hey, look, it's just a cost of living, right? We have health insurance now. My health insurance is way more than that. So, I think it's a continuation. It's a reduced amount from what we were paying as working folks from a healthcare perspective.
Right. Working our way through some of the common risks lurking beneath the waters in your retirement. Next up is inflation. And I know the inflation rate right now is pretty low, but it could become more of an issue down the road. And when we talk about inflation over the years, we talk about things costing more later on in retirement. This is where we go back to that quote from Jaws, going to need a bigger boat, right? Right.
Well, yeah. And inflation is always going to be around. I mean, we talked about, in fact, some people will talk about, deflation. Well, I don't see deflation really popping its ugly head up right now. We are going to have inflation. And with all the money that we're pouring into the system right now, one of the concerns is, will we have hyperinflation? And so inflation is something that has to be dealt with. We need to plan for it within our income plans to make sure that We've adjusted our income periodically to help take into account that we're going to have some inflation. And then if we don't, hey, that's just additional funding we can use for something else. But it's definitely something we need to make sure that we are making allowances for within our income plan.
As we talk about the risks lurking in retirement, and you talk about people wanting to find ways to deal with the low interest rates and low returns there, dealing with inflation down the road, we talk a little bit about growth. But of course, stock market risk is another one of those threats lurking in retirement, a drop in the markets. And I'll just throw out a hypothetical situation here, Philip. Maybe you have something like, I don't know, an 11-year bull run where the markets just go up and up and up. And then something wacky like a pandemic comes along and turns everything upside down. I mean, it sounds like it's out of a movie and all, Philip, but
who'd have thought? Who'd have thought that could ever happen, right?
Right. But these things happen. So you see why people get comfortable going there for growth. But we've had some stark reminders of just how costly that can be. How do we approach investing as we get closer to retirement?
You're right. And it's one of those things that when we have bull markets like that, we get lulled into this expectation that we can't lose money. The same thing happened in the 90s. You know, we had a huge bull run into 2000. And then things went crazy, and people, lost a lot of money in between 2000 and 2003. And so then the market bounced back, but not near what it had done before. You know, maybe we had 3 or 4 years of a decent market before 2008 happened. And then you're like you said, we had the 11-year bull run. And so we get lulled into this sense that we can't lose money. And unfortunately, that's not true. And the closer we get to retirement, the more impactful a market downturn can be. You know, we have what we call the retirement danger zone. And that's the 10 years prior to when you decide to retire and the 10 years after you actually do retire. Because in that 20-year window, should you have a market decline, a significant market decline, it can disrupt your retirement income. And if you don't have the right plan in place, it can be devastating to your retirement. And that's why I believe you need to have a retirement plan in place, an income plan in place that doesn't rely on the ups and downs of the stock market. That's not going to impact your income. And so that becomes so important during that retirement danger zone that we don't want to get caught off guard and be relying on the stock market to provide our income, because that can be dangerous. We need to make sure that we've got a plan in place that's going to get you the income you need all the way through retirement. And that's what we do here at Statler Financial. That's why I developed the Financial X-Ray. Give me a call right now and let's start that process for you. 863-285-3815. That's 863-285-3815. Folks, give me a call right now. Don't procrastinate. Don't put it off anymore. If you're getting close to retirement, give me a call. 863-285-3815.
You've been listening to the Statler Financial Radio Show. Thanks for joining us today. That number again, 863-285-3815. Be sure to tune in again next week for more insights from Philip. I am Jen Rezac. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great week.
If you have a retirement plan and would like a second opinion, call Statler Financial Services today. 863-285-3815. That's 863-285-3815.
Information provided during the Statler Financial Radio Show is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute investment, tax, or legal advice. Information has been obtained from sources that are deemed to be reliable, but their accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action. Annuity guarantees are based solely on the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing company. Individuals should thoroughly review the contract for specific details of the product features and costs. Income payments and withdrawals from deferred annuities are generally taxable as ordinary income in the year they are taken. All investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. No strategy is guaranteed to be successful.
This radio show is a paid placement.